what do I need to do to be at part of like the root cause? It was all purely networking. Networking, just continuing to do what I was already doing all those years before I even tried again.
It's a very passion-driven industry, and people always, for the most part, love helping others.
I feel like the RTS area of things needs a little love. And so then coincidentally happened to actually be working on one with a group, and it was very simple, but it was so fun. As a producer, I think that's when things really started to change.
What point in time do they involve QA, and what point in time they involve producers along their stage of building a game?
If you just start doing things the right way earlier on, there's not really much of a shift you have to take.
Hello, everyone. Really excited to welcome our new guest on the Game Makers Lounge. Here we have with us Margaret, who is someone I've personally worked with at Zynga. We both were on the Farmville Country Escape team, worked there for more than a few years, honestly, and as someone that I really respect, and we've been in touch ever since. So Margaret, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself before we dive in?
Yeah. So currently I'm a lead producer, and I've been in the industry for about 14 years. Got into gaming for the passion of it, and worked at Sony, Capcom, Zynga, a studio called Big Run, and now I'm at a studio called Super Evil Mega Corp. But I really love it here, and I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions.
That's a great name.
That is such a cool name.
I also work with another Margaret. And so to shorten it, even though it's not shorter, I'm referred to as the Super Evil Margaret. So it's been also an interesting name.
Remind me, was Farmville Country Escape the first Farmville mobile game or the second one? I can't remember.
I think there was an attempt at a mobile game prior.
So that was Castle Legends. Castle Legends was the first mobile title we did on Unity. That was actually with Rob and Brian, and then that's the same code base that we used to start Country Escape. So, in the code base, there were a lot of Castle Legends references.
There was.
Got it.
Yeah, so early mobile days, actually, we were just trying to figure out whether, we want to go, I think, Unity or, I don't know, some other platform. But anyways, I'm glad we chose Unity. Coming back to Margaret, so for those who don't know her, you started your journey as QA. How many years did you do that? And then would love to hear your transition from QA to production. What, compelled you to do so? And that transition actually happened on Farmville. And so I saw it firsthand, but I would love to hear the background there.
Yeah. So, I was at a bit of like an impasse in my career. I was mostly doing like nonprofits and things like that because I wanted to do something that, brought me like a sense of satisfaction in the work that I was doing. But I was really unhappy. There's like it takes a huge emotional toll working in nonprofits. My friends were really chastising me. They're like, I just don't know why you haven't worked in the gaming industry. And I'm like, how could I possibly work in the gaming industry? But I've always been like a major gamer, very competitive, huge advocate for like, why didn't they do this? Or why did they explain this and deliver this at the end of the day? I spent a lot of my time reading a lot of vlogs and blogs and magazines, PC magazine and Xbox magazine and all that stuff that used to come in the mail. And one of my friends was finally like, well, my uncle works at Sony. I think he knows the staffing agency. Maybe you could try doing QA and see if you like it. So they referred me to the staffing agency. At the staffing agency, where they're like, well, we worked for a lot of studios. There's no guarantee you'll get Sony. I got Sony. So that worked out. And it was really great. Like the people, the vibe overall, it was like, I feel like I found my people. There was a lot of, finally connecting with everyone on ways that I really hadn't been able to connect with a lot of people before. That was extremely satisfying. However, it was very difficult to get a full-time position at Sony. And even then at Sony, they're so well established, you're pretty much like, that's your position. And
was that,
you're committed.
What studio was it, Margaret? Was it like the console division or?
It was format quality compliance. So basically all of their actual systems, which I'm super grateful that I was there for that because it was during the Vita launch. I really thought it was ahead of its time. Love the Vita, still have my Vita. Regardless, that was what I worked for, but I did get to help a little bit with the submissions pipeline as well, and understand how games get submitted and rejected or approved. So that was a really great experience. But again, just not a lot of like room to grow. Very much like this is where we need you. So some people that I know moved off to Capcom. They referred me at Capcom, and thankfully Capcom was like, let's give it a shot. Lots of really great titles at Capcom, but the ones that I most notably worked on was Remember Me and Dead Rising 3. Definitely some ports and stuff too, like Resident Evil 4 and everything, but those games were great. I think Remember Me, looking at the journey, looking at the design documentation, what they originally wanted to do, it's like a little hurt that Sony didn't support the title and Capcom picked it up only to do like a reduced product, but I suppose that's game dev. And then, I ended at Capcom right when they were basically shutting down a few studios. So if you notice, like they shut down Capcom Vancouver, a couple of other locations. They really centralized to the Japan location. They kept the location in the Bay Area. They moved it from San Mateo to San Francisco. But my department did not get moved along with it. I wasn't let go, but my contract was not extended. Mm-hmm. But at that time, coincidentally, somebody from Zynga reached out and wanted to see if I would interview, and I got the gig. So as soon as my contract ended there, I rolled right into my contract with Zynga. So that was pretty seamless, I feel. QA at Zynga was really awesome. I started in the Ville side of the business.
Yeah.
So got to see a lot of products never make it out the door, unfortunately, but it was really great to see how everyone was working on those products. And just the development of our game, the success of Country Escape was also really exciting. And because of the virality of Farmville at the time, there was still like a lot of attention for, what people wanted or what we weren't doing well enough or all that good stuff. And
so I have a question
somewhere...
though. I do have a question there, though. So you obviously worked in these three companies, and you entered gaming with QA being like the foot in the door for you. Like, when is it that you realized that, oh, I'm actually good at this, but I want to also grow? Like, was it a learning curve? Did you see yourself get better? And was your passion for gaming really helping you do your job really, really well, maybe compared to some who've just come in as a job? So just walk me through that entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I think my passion for gaming has always been one of the main reasons for success. Because even working in a company that does games, there is a surprising amount of people who graduated university, went straight in, not really settled in their career, and probably not, some of them not even gamers. The gaming is more like a cultural thing, not like this is my deep down driving motivation factor, right? So I feel like that made me very opinionated, for better or for worse. It was like, that's just not normal, or why would you do that when other games clearly have done it like this way better? And I've just also never been the type to not say how I feel. Obviously I want to make it constructive, but if I feel very much like someone needs to say something, I'll probably say something. I think Sony was really where I felt like I want more, but I don't know what more looks like, because I didn't know what the titles are in the industry. I don't know what could be expected of me as QA. I had visions of grandeur, I think, when I got accepted at Sony, because I started immediately thinking back to those days where I was reading the magazines about upcoming titles, only to read the magazine about how the title performed and be like, what happened? And just get really frustrated as a user. Here is what I, wanted, but this is what I got and why. And just not understanding that whole pipeline. Mm-hmm. And so QA, in my naivete, I was like, oh, if I could do QA, I could help fix it so it doesn't get that far. Only to realize QA, for most companies, treat QA as the safety net. You are the end of the pipeline. And if there's a problem, it was way before it ever got to QA's hand. And it's most likely too late to make some of those fundamental changes. that were probably required. So after that, it was like, what do I need to do to be at part of like the root cause and hopefully prevent things at the beginning? And I didn't really know what that was going to turn into, right? The thing that I started to notice after being QA for some time was as I was chiming in with my opinions, I was like talking about some of these things, mostly schedule, like there wasn't a good enough time, or we knew that wasn't going to be on time. Like, why did we just continue with this? So eventually I started just kind of getting nosier and peeking my head into the production route. And then I think, they were just throwing me a bone over time, like, you can do it then. And then during that time, there was that transition where they changed EPs. And that was when I think you ended up coming on board, AJ.
Yep.
And then, the whole team kind of reshifted. And I liked a lot of the changes, mind you. There was a lot of like, see, this was some of the stuff that had to happen if we wanted to be better. And then thankfully, the EP at the time, a position was opening up, and he was actually very transparent with me. He's like, I haven't told anybody this, but there's a position opening up, and I would like to offer it to you, and just make that the immediate transition. And I was like, I would love that if that happens. He did. He was good on his word. And then I started doing the production stuff. The dirty of it though was he actually left like 2 months later.
I remember that.
Took a few producers with him, and I was the last producer left in San Francisco with AJ working on the team. So that was also that was a big thing. But yeah,
straight into the deep end.
Yeah.
So okay, you get offered the job. What's your next step? Are you overwhelmed with, yes, I mean, you've been in the industry, you kind of know how it operates, but it's still uncharted territory. What was your thought there? Were you like reading books, talking to people, getting help? What was the first step?
So I didn't do anything other than just talk to people when I was in QA. It was all purely networking. Just continue to do what I was already doing all those years before I even tried to get into QA, keeping on top of news, following different game dev profiles, that kind of thing. As a producer, I think that's when things really started to change because, well, I was definitely thrown into the deep end, and I absolutely was grabbing for a lifeline. Because essentially I'm like now responsible for this product, and I'm at like the lowest part of the totem pole, brand new into it. So even though the team was great, team was trusting, everyone worked with me, it was still like, how do I be accountable for something I've never been held accountable for? So I just looked at literally the company directory, everyone with a production title, and I just started mass emailing people. Intro, I don't know what I'm doing. Talk to me. Thankfully a lot of people started reaching out. Sabina was definitely my lifeline. She had already worked with me prior, but she was on a different product. And she helped me through like a lot of like at least more of the day-to-day stuff that like I was like, I'm trying to navigate, the politics around this, or here's my situation. How would you approach and try to maximize results? And then outside of that, I just started really talking to other producers, whoever would talk to me. And a lot of people walked me through their journeys. They walked me through their successes and failures. And literally the saying, standing on the shoulders of giants kind of thing was like, give me all of your failures and learnings so that I can avoid that as much as humanly possible. And the ship didn't sink. We actually started going upwards in our trends. So that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a ton of networking, a ton of research. I definitely read a bunch of articles. I started reading more about, project management, any types of videos or classes. Thankfully, a lot of it wasn't anything that I didn't really know. But it was more like how to piece things together intuitively. What was where I was like, I need people to like gut check me. Is this the right thing to do? Am I crazy for thinking we should try to do this? That kind of stuff.
This is very interesting. I mean, the two trends that I'm seeing in the last 10 minutes is essentially stay hungry in life, which is what you did. And the next thing is ask for help. I think like one thing even I realized when I was at Zynga, I was also climbing the ladder on the engineering side, but there are so many times that Zynga always threw you in the deep end, which is great because that gave a learning experience. But always ask for help. That's something I did. And I think that's people should realize there are more people willing to help you than not. And always raise your hand, ask for help. It's a very passion driven industry, and people always, for the most part, love helping others.
Yeah, I agree.
So while we're on that subject, any memorable okay, so you don't have to say Zynga just because you're ex-Zynga here, but what's your favorite memory of, like, you are a producer now, and what's your favorite and the worst memory you've had, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I won't say studio, but I will say just an unreleased title was one of my favorite experiences. It was an RTS, and RTS was my first real gaming like passions when I was younger, because I had a PC, MS-DOS days. But I really loved games like that, and I really wanted to see newer versions. I feel like the RTS area of things needs a little love. And so then coincidentally happened to actually be working on one with a group, and it was very simple, but it was so fun. And it was so competitive. People were literally playing in the middle of the night to like attack each other and like sabotage and things like that. And like, it was like the most clear feeling of like, this is why people are doing this. You know what I mean? And then worst, it's hard to say because this industry is so rife with layoffs. It's like, but I really hadn't been impacted until my last studio. But also being on the other side where you're not getting laid off, but a bunch of people who are very experienced, who've been there well before you, and have just a ton of like time and dedication and passion into something. Those were really difficult for me because it was almost like survivor's guilt of like, why am I here? Like why wouldn't you have kept this person who was clearly like super talented and experienced? And it was like really confusing, like picking up the pieces. And then as a producer, I realized a lot of my job is responsible for the morale of the team. And like, how do you remotivate people and get them to rededicate themselves? And doing that over and over and over again is probably, I think, the hardest part about my job. Whether it be on an individual basis or on a team basis, just convincing people that we're still here for all the right reasons, and this is why we should still take quality and care in our work.
No, I think I remember the game studio that you were mentioning. I clearly remember that time. The whole studio was just having a ball day and night. It was good time. I guess, I mean, you've worked in a bunch of titles. Has there been a particular reason for failure or a reason for success? Yes, I know. I mean, it's like a symphony, right? A game studio is like a symphony. All these departments have to work really well together, but there still could be some common things that should not happen. And maybe some things where successful teams have had a very similar recipe why, they attained success. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think about this a lot because ultimately as a producer, I'm also accountable for some of our success as a team. I feel like the trends, although there's definitely other factors, and this is by no means, a blanket answer, but I do feel like there's a good trend of like a lack of communication early and often. There's plenty of times where in passing people will say this critical thing could be better. But are you bringing that up to like the company play tests? Are you telling your manager? Are we escalating as a whole? And so one of the things that I try to do as a producer is try to give people a forum to be more vocal about those things earlier on. And my general rule of thumb is if at least 3 people bring it up to me in a short time period, I will escalate on their behalf and take it as far as I can go. And that's actually helped prevent a lot of things from becoming problems. But I do feel like there's this aspect of, we're all heads down, we're all just trying to do our work. And as a result, communication kind of dissipates when it's really critical that we are always on top of it all the time. That takes a lot of time and energy. And burnout is very real when you're constantly pouring like your literal heart and soul into this very creatively demanding industry to constantly like stay hungry, stay passionate, stay ready, and have the energy to continue to defend your ideas and the problems or areas that you would like to see improved. The other is really just schedule and setting expectations. I feel like I continue to see, senior leadership have like a level of expectation, but for some reason it's not getting trickled down in like plain language. I think there ends up being like this like business lingo verbiage that starts to get thrown around and it alienates the team. And I continue to see that happen since literally the beginning of my career in the gaming industry, where everyone's like business speaking, blah, blah, blah. And the team is like, what does it have to do with me? And then because there's now this disconnect, keeping people pointing towards a North Star and making sure that we're aligned as here's our timeline, here's what we're expecting you to do, those begin to start taking two very different paths because of like the mental picture you put in your head as to what you think should be happening versus what people think they're saying. And now we have these disparaging experiences. I think that also can even go up to the investor and the board level as well. Mm-hmm. So it's like super critical that people know how to not only receive the information, be open and humble enough to ask for that level of clarity all the time, and then be able to disseminate that back down to the people who are doing all of the day-to-day work and make sure there's no confusion as to where we're going, what the timeline and priorities are. That, I think, it's a really hard thing to do, for one. But it's ultimately what I think is the main reason why there's like success or failure is your ability to actually keep communication expectations tight. Because I feel like my experiences with senior leadership or the like, most people are pretty understanding as long as you're like, here's what we're doing and why, here's what we didn't do and why, here's where we're succeeding and failing and why. But you have to be humble about like why you're not doing well, and you have to be able to instill confidence that these were the decisions made and the right decisions made, and then take that and steer the conversation back towards, and here's how we're going to remedy, here's why this is still going to be a great and amazing thing. And you have to do that with everyone all the time. So, yeah.
I have a little bit of a different question that touches back a bit on what you said earlier about being QA and at Sony, and you had a voice for all these things, but you were kind of compartmentalized, I think is what you're saying. And for studios that are building their games now, they're in fresh studio, what point in time do they involve QA, and what point in time they involve producers along their stage of building a game? And should they involve them differently than is traditional? Do you think there should be some changes in how that's organized these days?
I'll say yes and no, depending on your objectives, but also depending on the person, right? I've met fantastic QA that are very much, here's my thinking, here's my path, and deviating from that is too much. And I've also met fantastic producers who are like, I am a live ops producer, but you make them do art production for a moment and, they're having a hard time.
Yep.
So there's a level of like situational management, I think that's in play, but like assuming perfect world, we have the opportunity to start fresh and we have the right group of people. I do think production should be involved from the beginning. Because I've been involved now on enough like game pitches and everything where it's like, this is based off of the data of the previous games, what I think we can realistically commit to with the right level of buffer, with the right level of headcount. And all too often I've seen production not be involved in those conversations. And as a result, we don't have the right headcount or the right hires at what we feel are better key moments to keep like up the momentum and pace. For QA, if you're working with a really strong QA, I also feel they should be involved after we've secured, here's what the product's going to be. So not at the very, very beginning, but literally shortly after and at a lead QA level, at least to be able to start holding the team accountable for this is what we are submitting. The reason why I say that is too often I've been involved in, now we need to take this game live to live ops. And this is a huge monumental shift the team has to take. But if you just start doing things the right way earlier on, there's not really much of a shift you have to take. Everyone kind of knows the deal. And there's no new language to learn. There's no weird expectations. There's no major schedule shift that needs to occur. So whenever we could start doing things the right way with the hopes that this is going to be our live product and this will be our forever thing, I think it's much easier for the team to just fall in line with the foundation that you set.
Got it. That makes perfect sense.
I think you said something very interesting, Margaret, which is in the previous segment of our conversation. It's like the production team is also responsible in like getting people to talk about the game, right? And as we all know, CJD, we both have ran engineering teams. A lot of times engineers, some are vocal for the most part, some just do their job but don't even speak, right? And that can happen, but yet it's the producer which, during Scrum or during playtest, they're asking and like nudging and trying to get information from engineers. I think that's a very amazing thing I've seen you do at Zynga when we work together. But it's also good to know that, yeah, that is indeed a really good thing that a production team can bring to the table, because more often than not, people do not like to make confrontational statements, especially if it's like outside their expertise, quote unquote expertise. But you know what? I think all opinions, as long as they're coming from people contributing, should be welcome. And I think that was a very interesting thing and important thing that you said, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the things I use that I like really lately is Miro. Miro has an anonymous way to join a board. And so during play tests, we have people just add sticky notes to the board around what felt good, what could have been better. And you can have your name attached to it or not. If you're worried if people are looking at you browsing through Miro, you can use the anonymous view. And that continues to collect a lot of great feedback from people who don't feel qualified to give feedback on these areas. And that, I think, is the most critical, because if anything, it's an outsider's perspective that always actually hones in on what is the real problem. And so more opportunities to give that, like, yeah. And I totally agree. Like, it's always going to be people who silo themselves and don't want to speak out and don't want to ruffle feathers. But if people don't do it, they're not going to get better at sounding non-confrontational when they get feedback. So I'll just try to remind people, like, you got to practice, and then we'll get better at communicating.
Yeah, and I bet there's also a little bit of noise there, but it's still, in the grand scheme of things, better that people speak.
Yeah.
I've always felt bad for all the other disciplines that have to speak to engineers to begin with.
That is so true.
A lot of personality there.
Indeed.
I mean, AJ is a pleasure, so I think.
Hey now.
Yeah. Well, he's here.
I'm the easiest person to work with. So, a couple qualities you mentioned for being really successful or a good producer. You spoke about communication. You spoke about just the transparency of managing up as well as managing down. I always say this, that I feel like production is like the axle to the wheel, which is game making. They're extremely important. They're working across disciplines. Any other qualities that you think, upcoming producers should think about that have helped you, apart from the two that you've mentioned?
So I think one of the things for current producers is one size does not fit all. I think, I see things like, we're an agile team, get flown around a lot, and it's not like agile is bad, but maybe for this group, agile doesn't work right now. And you need to just accept that and focus on moving the team forward. And then we can work on becoming more agile or more efficient where it makes sense, right? So oftentimes it's just identifying those kind of things. Like, yes, it'd be great if we did our story points and all this perfect planning and stuff. But for a lot of people, there's a lot of people who are constantly new in the industry. They don't know how to do any of that stuff. And just recognizing that and getting that to a point where it is better. And when I say one size does not fit all, I'm also saying production process is always going to evolve. The nature of the work is going to change. The partners you're working with may change. The people who are doing the work may change. There's so many things that are constantly changing. You need to figure out what is meaningful change versus what is noise, and keep the team focused on meaningful change and just accepting of integrating meaningful change. For new producers, the thing that I would definitely, that I usually give advice on is, join communities. So Discord communities, there's, especially with the state of the industry now, a lot of groups are making their own Discord communities, coming together, forming new connections, referring each other to other gigs, having like in-person go-to meetups, which I'm working on, similar as well in the Bay Area. I would like to get some meetups going. And then follow all of the game studios that you like, and find the recruiter in the LinkedIn profile and just start messaging the recruiter. Any information that you get from the recruiter is super critical, because for all you know, they might be open to accepting an intern or accepting a part-time work with somebody who's not done this before. And I usually tell people, like, there's a lot of skills that you people already have that can be transferable. You just need to show that. So if you already have a resume, well, I worked at, Old Navy. And it's like, okay, well, what did you do? Did you help organize things? Were you proactive in other areas? Like, there's ways that you can reframe your experience to show that you're capable. And the way that you can understand what you're capable of is start looking at all of the job postings for the job that you want and look at for a similar language. So if they're all saying like you need to be good at this, then figure out what that means for you and figure out how to translate. And if you're still nervous, there's a lot of indies that are looking for free work or intern work, that I think it's worth a shot. Just asking, like, can I just work for you and see if I can help? Anything to get your foot in the door, essentially, is what I will hope that people could feel brave enough to try, because you'll never know if you don't start reaching out and asking.
That is so true. And obviously, once you start the community, we'll add it to the YouTube link, so other people watching this can obviously click on it and get in. But yeah, I think we're coming toward the end here. Really appreciate your time. So Margaret, you've conquered the QA land, you've conquered the production world. Is there what's next for you? Where do you see yourself 2-5 years down the line? Do we see yourself start your own game studio?
I think anyone who's dedicated to this industry has that as like a next step for them one day. I don't know. It is definitely like here's my top 5 games I'd love to make myself with a group of people is on the bucket list for sure. In the next 2 years, I'm not sure, because I'm still very much on this product. We have our current timeline. But yeah, I very much want to honor, I guess, the whole reason why I came into the industry, which is as a user, I want to know that I put out a product that I'm super proud of from start to finish, and would be something that continue to evolve and dedicate myself to. I think that would be amazing.
Very cool. When you start a game studio, you know where to go for your backend stuff. So we're just going to be
you're absolutely first on my list, AJ, I promise.
Very cool. Well, thanks, Margaret. It was really lovely chatting with you and seeing you again. And I will keep coming to you for my getting tips on production, because I play the producer at Snapser, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.